You know those stories that start out super small, almost insignificant, but end with a number so huge you can barely get your head around it? Well, we've got one of those for you today, and believe me, it holds the key to a totally different way of thinking.
So let's rewind the clock to 1995. There's this graphic design teacher, Linda Weinman, and she needs a place online, like a digital sandbox, for her students to mess around with new tools like Photoshop and show off their work. It was nothing fancy, just a practical little website for her class. It was called lynda.com.
Fast forward 20 years, that little website, it was sold for $1.5 billion.
Yup, that's what LinkedIn paid for it back in 2015. So how on earth does a teacher's class project blow up into $1 billion company? Well, it's not some secret formula. It's about a specific way of thinking. It's the power of having 6 counterconventional mindsets.
So what in the world is a counterconventional mindset? Well, think of it like an attitude, a default setting that shapes how you react when an opportunity comes knocking. But here's the kicker. These mindsets almost always fly directly in the face of the so-called best practices you learn at a huge corporation or in a business school textbook. These 6 mindsets, they're really what separates entrepreneurs from the rest of the pack. And the best part is, they're learnable, they're incredibly powerful, and they are exactly what we're going to break down today. Okay, ready? Let's dive into this. First up, we've got the yes, we can mindset. This one is all about what you do when a customer comes to you and asks for something you have absolutely never done before. You see, the big company way is to stick to your knitting, just focus on what you're already good at and say no to everything else. But the entrepreneurial way, it's to look that challenge in the eye and say, yes, we can, and then figure out how to do it, just like a Brazilian entrepreneur named Arnold Correa did. So Arnold, he'd already totally reinvented his events business twice. Then a client asks if he can install TVs and satellite uplinks in 260 stores all across Brazil. Now, he knew zip about satellite tech, but what did he say? Yes, we can do that. And later, when Walmart asked if he could move those screens onto the sales floor for advertising, he said yes all over again. By just jumping at opportunities way outside his comfort zone, he completely reinvented his business 4 times.
Now let's move on to our second mindset because it builds right on top of this. Problem-first logic. This is all about falling in love with the problem you're solving, not getting obsessed with the product you're selling. Big companies, oh man, they love to just tweak their products. Think about new Coke, or when a laundry detergent changes its little blue speckles to green and calls it new and improved. Entrepreneurs, though, they obsess over problems. They find a real, painful issue and just dedicate themselves to fixing it. Take the story of Jonathan Thorne. He developed this new metal alloy for surgical forceps that didn't stick to human tissue. Pretty cool, right? Well, he started out by targeting plastic surgeons, but the business didn't really take off until he found a group with a way bigger problem: neurosurgeons. I mean, think about it. When you're operating on someone's brain, the absolute last thing you want is your tools sticking to tissue. By zeroing in on that critical problem, he built an unbelievably successful company. And that story is the perfect lead-in to our third mindset: think narrow. Yeah, it sounds totally backward, I know, but the path to thinking big almost always starts by thinking really, really small. You see, huge corporations, they have to go after giant markets just to move the needle on their massive revenues. But an entrepreneur, they can start by finding a super painful problem for a very specific, very narrow group of people, kind of like the founders of a little company called Nike. Way before they were this global giant signing Michael Jordan, Nike was focused on a tiny market: elite distance runners. And the problem was that running shoes back then were built for sprinters, and they were causing injuries like sprained ankles for the long-distance guys. So Nike just obsessed over making a better shoe for that one small group. And once they nailed that process, well, they had the blueprint to expand into tennis, basketball, and, the rest of that story. All right, let's talk about money. Mindset number 4 is huge. It's about getting paid first and having your customers actually fund your growth. For an entrepreneur, cash isn't just king, it is literally the air they breathe. Big companies are often just swimming in cash, spending billions on things like stock buybacks. But entrepreneurs have to be scrappy. They have to find creative ways to get paid before they deliver the product. And you know what? Maybe no one has ever mastered this better than the team at Tesla. Before they had even built the very first Tesla Roadster, the team went on a roadshow. They targeted wealthy, eco-conscious buyers and sold 100 cars right there on the spot for $100,000 each, paid in full right then and there. And just like that, they had $10 million in the bank before production even started. They did it again with the Model 3, taking in $500 million in $1,000 deposits. In both cases, the customer's cash was funding the company's growth. It's just a brilliant model. Okay, now for our final two mindsets. And I'm grouping them together because they're both about being incredibly resourceful. And, let's be honest, breaking some rules. How to use other people's stuff, and why you should just bypass permission. First, beg and borrow. The founders of GoApe, this treetop adventure company, they needed trees. So instead of buying a whole forest, they partnered with the UK Forestry Commission. They borrowed the trees, the parking lots, even the bathrooms. All they had to pay for was their own gear. And second, don't ask permission. I mean, seriously, do you think Uber would even exist if they'd asked city regulators for permission to start a taxi company with no taxis? No way. They just went for it. Entrepreneurs often live in those gray areas where the rules just haven't caught up yet. So as we start to wrap this up, I want to leave you with a few questions to chew on. First off, as you're listening to all this, which of these mindsets do you already see in yourself? Maybe you're a yes, we can person through and through. And here's the more important question. Which of the others could you actually learn and apply? Because these aren't genetic traits, right? They're skills. Which one could help you tackle a challenge you're staring down right now? And hey, it doesn't have to stop with you. Who could you teach this stuff to? How could you empower a colleague or maybe even your whole team to start thinking a little more like an entrepreneur? And here's the last thought I'll leave you with. What's one roadblock sitting in front of you that you could absolutely smash through tomorrow just by applying one of these mindsets? Because at the end of the day, these 6 rules for breaking the rules aren't just for entrepreneurs. They're for anyone who wants to solve a real problem and maybe, just maybe, change the world.